Hey there, this is a review for our Castles and Crusades campaign. This is session number 50, big 5-0. It was a good session. We're back with the B team, and they are in the, right where they left off. They're at the Elven encampment, the Blackwood Elves. They're sitting around the central fire pit with Korg and Sinwy, the elf that they've interacted with directly, and the other elves that are milling about or on guard duty and such. This was they kind of picked up where we left off, and Eostamar starts to reveal his backstory a little bit to everybody there, and about how he's from the Fey realm, and that his mentor or master, not really a mentor, like he wasn't so much a willing servant of this guy, has a plot to overtake, I think it's called the Ivory Tower. And he has this desire to get back there to help prevent that. And that leads them to talk about ways to get back to the Fey realm. And Korg, the troll mystic shaman that's there, he tells them about a place called in the Blackwood Forest, in the darkest heart of the Blackwood Forest. This place called Dark Silk Grove, and he's never been there, but it is rumored to hold portals to many realms. So they're given that nugget of information. The elves agree to escort the party to the outskirts of Wyvernspire the following day. So in the course of that conversation that evening around the fire, the elves, who are very isolationists, have softened a little bit towards the party, with maybe the exception of Dern, because there's that elven dwarven history of how the elven lands were basically destroyed by the dwarves indirectly. Well, maybe not indirectly, but it was the dwarves caused that to happen. A dwarf in particular, this Lord Morcal, who fell to demon worship, caused that to happen. But they do soften a little bit, and especially towards Astamar, because he's an elf, and a little bit different than them, but he's an elf. Astamar talks a little bit with Sinwy and asks if they've ever had in their group an arcane caster. And Sinwy tells them they did at one point. They had an elf named Matamawi who was a arcane caster, but he died. And Eostamar starts to inquire about, like, well, did he have, like, basically a spell book or any stuff that he could possibly use, although he did not come right out asking for it. He's just, inquiring about it. And Sinwy leaves for a bit, goes into one of the little huts up in, because the Blackwood Elves live in trees. Goes up, comes back with this little leather-bound book, which is basically Matamawi's spell book. And he gives it to Eostamar, which Eostamar initially kind of doesn't want to take it, because he's like, you don't understand how much of a honor this is, to give this, how valuable a spell book is. And Matamawi's like, Sinwy's like, we don't have a use for it. And he would have wanted it to go to somebody else, especially an elf, with the ability to use arcane magic. So he gives him that spell book. In particular, above board, Matt, my buddy Matt, who plays Astamar, he was looking to add, obviously, like all wizard spells, to his character's thing, and he wanted like a fireball spell. So we put fireball in there, and there's going to be some other spells. I need to flesh out what's in that spell book, and but it was kind of an on the improv moment. Like, I didn't know he wanted to do that, so we just kind of went with that. I love those moments in the game. They're some of my favorites, actually. So just flesh it out later. Matter of fact, I'll probably do that today. They rest here in this the Blackwood Elves encampment. They don't have to set watch or anything. The place is well defended by the elves. So they leave early the next morning, and they strike off. And it takes them over a day to get there, but they're well protected the whole time. Sinwy takes them. He has about a half a dozen elves with him. who kind of ghost the party as they are led to Wyvernspire. They catch them, you know, in their periphery, but they're pretty much very invisible once they're in the woods, and they'll report back to Sinley about any potential dangers or anything like that. But they don't have any problems. It ends up taking 2 days to get there, but they're eventually brought to the outer edges of Wyvernspire, which was once called Fort Windmere when it was ruled by the Griffin Riders of Asharon. Before they leave, before the elves depart, they did learn too that elves had gone there early on and didn't return. So the party had said, well, if we find them, we'll return them. And they're like, well, we believe they're most likely dead, but if you do find them, if you could lay them to rest, we would greatly appreciate it, which the party readily agrees to do. Before they part ways with Sinway and his company, Sinway gives Dern actually a satchel and says, this is from Cord, the troll, and it's basically a healing satchel. So it's got, I think it had like 4 healing potions in it, bandages, and this salve that you could put on wounds for healing. So they have a little bit of extra healing ability. So he gave that to them, which Dern gratefully accepts. And there's a little exchange between Dern and Sinway about, about being sorry what happened to them and stuff, and that the dwarves caused it, which was pretty cool. So they enter the ruins of Castle Windmere, and then as they're coming up, they along this journey to there, they'd come across where there was once a regular used road, and they followed that because they had to go a little ways on their own, and Trotter leads them. And they eventually come into where the roads, this old broken cobblestones and overgrown trees and bushes and stuff. But as they get close to the ruins, the road is lined with these statues of griffins, and they're in various states of, disarray over the years and not being taken care of. But they know they're here, and they get to the gates, and Trotter stops. Now, Trotter's a halfling. He's he has like this super wanderlust thing, which has driven him far from his homeland. But he stops, and before entering the open gates to this ruin, and he turns to Orvon, and he says, you should be the first one to enter here. You have claim on this place. You should be the first one to enter, which is they realize is kind of a big thing for Trotter to do, because he wants to explore. He wants to be the first one in an area, and they know people have not come here in 150 years that they know. Like, humans have not come here in like 150 years. So that's it was a big deal for him to do that. And Orvon in turn also takes his squire Willem and says, you should be with me. And Willem is kind of overwhelmed with awe. He's like, we're going to be the first ones to come into this, our old fortress, and again, nobody's been here in 150 years. They'll be the first ones. So it's kind of a moment between those two characters, and then they enter, and the place is in ruin. They start to investigate a little bit further. They find that some of the walls, the ruined walls and buildings, are blackened from fire. They even find some old claw marks, and then they start to find where there's a lot of the stuff is covered in feces, and it's in various states of freshness. And then so they keep pushing through, and the spire's in the middle. This giant spire that's 200 feet high and at least 100 feet wide is right in the middle of this fort. And they're pushing towards that. And they had seen earlier what they think were giant birds flying around the top of the spire. And Aestamar, because of his elven sight, could actually see ruins at the top of the spire. And when they get in closer, like where they're at now, they can see that there's stairs carved in the side of the spire, winding all the way upward, which they're like, oh crap, we're gonna have to climb all those stairs. And there were some jokes about being thankful Cosmo wasn't there from the regular group, who was also played by my buddy Chris, because he would not have liked it at all, and probably Matt's other character wouldn't have liked it either. Sprawl, he's older dwarf, so he wouldn't have been up for that. But anyway, so they're making their way towards the spire. Then they come to a particularly section in the ruins where it's just covered in vomit, and they're like, they had no idea, I don't think, what to make of that. And one of the things I tell them, like in the middle of it, is like the carcass of a bear, and they were like, what the heck, you know, what caused this? And they're debating all this when suddenly they hear this screeching noise from above, and they look up, and these two reptile flying creatures are coming down. They're basically wyverns, Wyvernspire, right? And they come down. So there's a fight. Nobody's surprised. We rolled for surprise. It wasn't surprise, so that worked out in their favor. And they battle these two wyverns. It was a pretty good fight, actually. It went back and forth. There was some damage done on both sides. Dern avoided being poisoned. He was one of the only ones that got hit with a stinger, but he's a dwarf, so he was really good at his poison save. And he avoided being poisoned, which was a good thing. He had some spell disruption. Dern had a spell disrupted by taking damage. He took a claw bite attack, got hit with all three. And I allow concentration checks, and he made one, but then failed the next one, so he lost his spell. He was going to cast his, I think it's Wyvernspire. I think that's what he casts a lot. Kind of like the druid version of spiritual weapon. Yeah, they ended up ultimately defeating these wyvern, and they're standing around, you know, collecting themselves. Trotter's actually collecting like meat and skins from the wyvern. And he is in the process of doing all that. I'm trying to remember when this next event happened, if it happened before or after. Yeah, I think it was not long after this. Yeah, so after this, they're doing the process of doing this when, at the end of the battle, two ghostly apparitions come out, materialize, and they're dressed as knights, and Orvon and Willem can tell that they are, from their raiment, that they are former knights of Asharn, and they stop them. Then a third ghost comes out, and I had a picture of this guy that I found online that I used, and he comes out, and he addresses them, and he explains that he was Commander Senshin, who was the commander of this Fort Windview, as it was called by the Knights, when it fell. And he mentions it fell to Sacrilliax, the Flaming Death, which was a dragon. And they knew, Orvon and Willem know the history of this, of Fort Wilhelm, and basically Sacrilliax, the Flaming Death, was this red dragon that came in at the opening of the Dragon Wars and hit this place, because it was the, and he had a flight of wyverns with him at the time too, because it was Asharn's most northern, one of their most northern outposts, and it was for the Griffin Riders, so they knew it was very strategic, so they hit this place early and defeated it. They learned from Commander Senshin that you know, he was dishonored by this loss. He lost Goldfeather, which was his griffin mount, and that's why they haven't been put to rest, is that because of that dishonor. So he and the ghost. So Orvon talks with him a bit, and he asks, you know, he recognizes Orvon as a knight, and asks him why he's here. He tells him, and he's like, oh, the old traditions hold true about proving yourselves to be a knight, and to rise and station within the knighthood. And he agrees that they will help them reach the top of the spire, because they're really worried about climbing the spire and getting attacked on the stairs, and which is a legitimate concern. So they agree. So the party, they make that, the ghosts kind of go away, and then they decide to rest because they took a little bit of damage. So they take a little bit of a rest, do a little bit of quick healing. It's not an overnight rest, but so this allowed me to introduce something that been kicking around. We have Trotter. He's like, well, I'll be right back. He's collecting wyvern meat and skins. He tries to actually collect some poison, but he isn't able to. And he takes off for a little bit, and then he comes back, and he's got like a handful of bird eggs that he had scavenged. He's a ranger. He can do those things with little difficulty. And what he does is he makes this, it's something I took from, I'm a big fan of the Pathfinder Kingmaker computer game. And they have these recipes in the game. And these recipes, if you make a successful check, offer a benefit. So I've incorporated these into our camping moments and rest moments, like in the field. So he makes basically what's called, right out of the video game, Monster Casserole. And what it does is it just gives them, for one day, they get like a +2 bonus to damage. Not a huge thing, but it's just a little thing to make camping a little bit more interesting. And it's actually a neat feature in the game, the video game. So he makes that. They all have some, and proceed up to the top of the, start to climb up to the stairs winding around the tower. They did look to see if there was another way into the spire, and there wasn't one that they could find. Halfway up the climb, sure enough, a couple wyverns come after them. But the ghosts appear, and the ghosts kind of envelop them, kind of like right out of like Return of the King, the movie, where the ghosts help Aragorn and such. And the ghosts deal with the wyverns, which the party was very grateful for, because they did not want to fight, 100 feet up in the air on these treacherous stairs against a couple wyverns. But the ghosts take care of it for them. They reach the top, and they do see that it's covered in ruins. But when they explore a little bit further, they realize that the spire is actually hollow, and there's a shaft that goes all the way down the middle of it. And they can see where, when the fort was active, there was old lifts and such in place. And most of them are broken and decayed, but some of them are still dangling there. And they can also see that there's a set of stairs that winds downward on the inside of the spire. And that's pretty much where we left off when they reached the top. There was some debate when they were still on the ground, as they get the impression that, and I think Commander Sanchin helped give them that impression as well, is that the dragon might still be here. I think he told them that I think so. I'm trying to remember my own game. But there was a lot of debate about whether they should try to lure the dragon out to them. And they finally came to the conclusion that that probably is not going to work. They're super smart. They were kind of maybe hoping because he was arrogant he would come, but they decided that it's probably not going to work. So then they proceeded up to the top of the tower. But it was a really good session, 50th session, which is really cool. I just to talk about that a little bit. My old campaign, we played it for 7 years, and I think we had maybe, I don't even know if we hit 40 sessions. It was just so spread out, trying to schedule everybody, and scheduling was a murder in that campaign. It's the reason it lasted as long as it did. It was a great campaign, but it got stretched out way long, because when I would schedule a session, I would try to obviously want everybody there. So if we didn't have everybody, we didn't play typically. And a lot of it was very character driven. Like, this is kind of a character driven story. And this one here, this is Orvan's quest. This was actually designed to be like a 3-session adventure based around an idea I had for Orvan back when he was a regular character in the campaign. But for the most part in this campaign, either with the B team or the regular group, I'm not doing character driven stories. I enjoy them quite a bit, but with playing with adults that are not retired like me, it's hard, because you want everybody there for the story, especially the person that it focuses on. So I don't do that now as much with this camp, with the Castle Crusades. And I've kind of gotten away a little bit from the West Marches, where everything begins and ends in one session. We'll probably get back to that a little bit more. Not sure what's going to happen with the B team. We had a discussion after this session about maybe switching it up and going, after they finish this adventure, switching to some other games. I have a ton of other games to play. And guys are kind of open to, this group is really open to doing a lot of different things, which is great. But then yesterday, I'm doing some prep work for the next session, and by the time I get doing the prep work, it blew up on me and created a bunch of ideas. So we may stick with the B team for a while, at least what I'm going to run. We're going to mix some other stuff in with my son running his game, and then some of the other guys, Matt and Chris, want to run some one shots and stuff. So we'll definitely do that on the Thursday night group, which is what the B team is. But yeah, right now I'm leaning towards, after doing all that prep work yesterday and getting kind of inspired with some ideas. Let me stick with the B team for a while and see where this campaign, this part of the campaign, takes us. It's another interesting thing about running 2 campaigns within the same setting, timeline, and group that intermingle is if you have the time to do something like that, one of the benefits to it that I've found is it's giving the campaign a lot more depth, right? Like we tend to in typical campaigns, like you can sometimes get locked into like the only thing going on in the world is what your characters are dealing with. Well, now we have 2 sets of characters and they're both dealing with separate things. So it gives that depth to the world that makes it a little more realistic, if you can use that term in a fantasy setting. I like a little bit of realism with my fantasy, so but it just gives it a lot more depth, and that's some of the even feedback I've gotten from like my son said that we were talking about, and he's like, it just seems more real, like because we have one group doing one thing that's unconnected and we have another group doing a totally different thing. Those groups of intermingle, the characters of, some of them know each other and stuff. Like Orvon knows most of the other characters in the other group. Lort knows some of these characters. So it's a really neat dynamic for the campaign. But if you have the ability to do that, and I recommend it. But yeah, that was episode 50. We're gonna pick this up not next week or this coming week because it's Thanksgiving, so we won't play then. But the following week we should hopefully finish up this Orvon's quest here and see where they go afterwards. Another little note on how I run games is I don't try to lead them in any certain direction. Yeah, I drop like a ton of hooks and stuff, but I'm not super invested in any one of them. I want to see which ones they're invested in and which one, because players will always surprise you what they latch onto, and they'll see things from a different perspective than you see it, and sometimes they create stuff that you didn't even think of. So a lot of times that happens. So I like to just throw stuff out there and see what they grab onto, and if I know like the things that they're interested in the most in, that's what I want to do, because they're going to be more invested and more and enjoy that more. So I throw a bunch of stuff out there. So I'm interested to see after this session what they've latched onto and what they want to do. But we'll find out in future recaps. As always, thanks for watching, and I'll catch you at the next one.